This is a short clip from my parent membership group on Subscribestar. That's where I post my most practical and comprehensive videos. Once a month, I address common questions in the form of a topic video. And I also run live monthly Q&As where parents can submit a question and briefly talk through their situation with me. Please check out my Subscribestar to learn more about the different subscription levels. Now here's the video. All right, so I'm going to start talking about some principles. And in general, I thought about these principles because they offer a nice contrast to the kind of gender identity belief system or the gender ideology that a lot of kids have become absorbed in. So the first principle is make room for complementary qualities. We tend to think about these in the gender world as masculine and feminine qualities, but it's not just that, right? So the thing that really annoys me about gender identity theory is that it seems to have kind of co-opted a young person's ability to think about almost like the yin-yang elements, polarities and contrasts that are just a part of life. And masculinity and femininity are one version of those, but they certainly are not all the versions that matter or all the versions that can exist. So, along similar lines, when we analyze ROGD or a young person's gender dysphoria and we focus solely on harmful stereotypes, let's say, we might be kind of missing a part of the story here. So there's something I think more essential, and I don't mean biologically essential insofar as like if you're female, you have to be feminine. That's not what I mean. But like these different types of elements that kids are picking up on, maybe they're soft elements versus hard elements, passive versus active, things like that, that they're reading into gender that are not really about gender. They're more about how do we access all the different parts of ourselves, And so masculine and feminine kind of takes over that analysis and becomes kind of flat, and it's really about aesthetic and appearance. So I think behind the gender facade, a lot of clients that I've worked with are actually struggling with parts of their personality that they think are incompatible or that they're trying to develop or are feeling uncomfortable with. And that goes way beyond gender, it goes way beyond masculinity and femininity. So if trans is an attempt to kind of access or grow or let's say squash certain parts of yourself, it might be helpful to just give kids other ways to think about this. And whether I say kids, I mean young adults too. Like it could be even an interesting conversation to have with an older kid, a young adult kid. So I mentioned, there's active and passive parts of ourselves. Times when, we want to take the back seat and be an observer and be quiet and silent, and times when we want to be really active and proactive and action oriented, right? We have a thinking part and a feeling part. And in different contexts and at different moments, we may need to draw upon and access those parts to fit the situation or to meet our own needs or to meet the needs of others. We have strength and flexibility, right? Sometimes we have to be very rigid and stick with our guns and not be flexible. And then other times we actually have to be very flexible. We also have parts of us that might be detail oriented and like really laser focused and think about these granular minutia. And then other times when we have to step back and look at the big picture and understand how things fit together. Now, I know this sounds very esoteric compared to like, I know I'm a boy because I feel more comfortable in pants. Like, I know that this is a far cry from what your kids are probably saying and thinking about and talking about, but I also think many of these kids are highly intelligent. And if we're not directly threatening their worldview, they might be really interested in kind of talking about some of these things. A soft side, a playful side versus a more stoic and pensive side or kind of aggressive side. So these are kind of the examples of things I'm thinking about. And while I was kind of thinking through these contrasting elements, I thought about kids who are either at the beginning of their exploration or maybe desisting, who seem to vacillate wildly between like one extreme gender presentation and another. So it's like a girl who, I've talked to parents on the phone who are like, 2 weeks ago, this kid was in a bikini, like putting fake eyelashes on family vacation. And then today she's literally chopped all her hair off and she's in a hoodie and she just looks like a boy in a way. So I think there are kids who are trying to figure out how to do different roles, how to access parts of themselves. And I think that's a great example of how that could look. And the same thing with desistance stories. Sometimes you hear about a kid who desists and within a week they are, I want extensions. I want, they're females, of course, right? Like who really want to go the complete opposite direction. And it's really tricky because they're young and they don't have a fully fleshed out sense of themselves yet. And so we do have to kind of give them space to go at their own pace and figure these things out in these kind of concrete ways. But I would just, encourage you to think about how maybe there's something else going on here. I also want to add, within a lot of trans activist kind of narratives, whether online or in person or in these kind of LGBT support groups, or definitely gender therapists say, well, try on different roles and see what feels comfortable, almost like you're playing dress up. So some of these behaviors, this vacillation between extremes, may be an attempt for kids to like try on gender identities to see what fits. But I also think behind the activist narrative or like the influence or the indoctrination, there's always like a kind of root, like a seed there of some real need the kid is trying to meet that's usually much more metaphorical, not as concrete as the way the activist narrative portrays it. So for this first principle, here's my suggested language. And so I'm just going to kind of read from what I wrote. Personally, I don't like being confined to such rigid labels. We have so many parts of ourselves, and it's natural to have different parts of you that feel more prominent depending on your stage in life, the context, which friends you're around, your mood, etc. We all have both strong and flexible parts, active and passive parts, thinking and feeling parts. Sometimes it feels like gender identities are kind of replacing those other, more interesting ways to think about parts of ourselves. So that's how it came up for me. I hope that is interesting and resonant for you. If you found this video helpful, you'll want to join my parent membership group, where you'll find a lot more depth and detail, along with practical parenting advice. The link is in the video description below. Thanks for watching.